spin wool into yarn. So what is spinning exactly? Well, essentially, it's taking a fiber, drafting it out, twisting it, and loading it onto a bobbin. Then you have finished yarn. With that yarn, you can make cool things like hats and sweaters. So, I want to talk about electric spinners versus traditional spinners. My personal preference is electric. I feel that you have to concentrate a lot less with the electric. You focus on what your hands are doing, there's no motion with your feet, and that is awesome. It also frees me up so that while I'm spinning, it's a more relaxing activity, and I can have my tablet sitting right next to me, and I can watch other YouTube videos while I'm spinning. Next, I want to talk about staple length. Staple length is considered the average length of the fibers from the animal. For example, on the back of the animal, you have a longer staple length. The fiber on the belly of the animal tends to be shorter, so we're taking the average length from the whole animal. The breeds that we have are Old English Baby Doll Southdowns. They tend to be about 2 inches or less. The Shetlands range from 3 to 5 inches in staple length. The longer the staple length, the much easier it is to spin. The shorter the staple length, such as the baby doll wool, it is more difficult to spin and it is more difficult to draft. It can tend to break more easily while you're drafting it. Also, the staple length can determine the speed at which you're spinning on your machine. Let's talk about materials needed for spinning. I'll walk over to our spinning wheel. So you're going to need a chair to sit in. I recommend designating an old apron to wear while you're spinning. As you can see, it does tend to get a lot of stray fibers on the apron, as well as lanolin, which is the grease from the animal. You're also going to need the wool itself. This could be in the form of a carded bat or roving. Next, I want to talk about setting the tension for your spinning. So on my electric spinner, the tension knob is located right here. If I were to turn this clockwise, this is tightening the tension. When I turn it counterclockwise, we're loosening the tension. The higher the tension, the higher the take-up will be onto the bobbin. When I loosen the tension, you have less take-up on the bobbin. Some other things I've learned from my experience is that when the bobbin is empty, it takes it up really fast, whereas when my bobbin is really full, it takes it up really slowly. Usually at that point, I know it's time to switch to another bobbin. Next, we need to obtain what's called the roving. Roving is essentially a strip of carded wool that's in a long strip. This is an example of what I would call roving. Sometimes you can buy roving already in that state. However, since I do my own, I make carded wool bats. So I'm going to take my bat and turn it into roving. Here's an example of a carded bat. Now this one has already had some strips torn off of it. I'm going to show you a full-sized one. So this is more typical size of what I produce, and this is called a carded bat. You can watch my other videos for this technique. So to make the roving, I'm going to be tearing a vertical strip from this bat, top to bottom. And it's pretty easy to tear. So you can watch me do that. So I'm starting at the top. And gently tearing down the length of the bat. Okay, so now I have a strip removed. So looking at the size of this, I can actually tear this in half one more time. I could pre-draft it this size, but it would take a little bit more strain on my wrist, and I like to make things easier if possible. So I'm going to tear this in half one more time. Don't worry if it's not perfectly symmetrical. We're going to be drafting it anyways. Okay, so now we have 2 thinner pieces of roving. This is a great size to begin with. Remember, I'm going for size 6 super bulky single spun yarn. So this is the most important part of spinning, and it is called pre-drafting. We're going to take these fibers and thin them out ahead of time before we take it to the wheel. Now, other ways of spinning, they'll take it and draft it at the wheel while they're spinning. But this is way more beginner friendly and way more relaxing in my opinion. So we're gonna start by grabbing this with my dominant hand. I'm grasping the fiber. With my non-dominant hand, I'm pulling down. You can see that the fibers are, it looks like they're lengthening. Basically, they're pulling apart. And this is called pre-drafting. If there's any advice to take home about spinning, this is the key point. It is all about pre-drafting. Also, how thin you draft this is going to depend on how thick or thin of a yarn that you're intending to make. The key is you want to not have the fibers break apart. So I'm pulling down with my non-dominant hand while my dominant hand is staying stationary on the top. So we're going to do this on the entire length of this roving. This can practically double in length from when we started. If you happen to see any vegetable matter, you can pick it out ahead of time. Most of it has been picked out during the processing phases, but sometimes it's impossible to get every last piece. So go ahead and clean your fiber if you need to. And although this does seem rather time-consuming, this makes it a lot easier when you're at the wheel. Like I said, I actually enjoy watching YouTube videos while I'm spinning. And I'm able to do so because most of the work is being done ahead of time via this pre-drafting. Sometimes you can go back a second time with this pre-drafting just to make sure that it's a consistent thickness that you want. On the other hand, one thing that's cool about spinning your own wool is the inconsistencies. So thick and thin and some variation in it gives it more character. We're almost finished here with this. Also, the length of roving that I end up with depends on the size of bat that I took it off of. You'll see in future videos that I have a pretty large drum carder, so I'm able to make pretty large bats. One thing that's nice about having the long piece of roving is that you have less places where you're doing a joining. Sometimes when you're joining roving while you're spinning, it can end up thicker in that spot. So the less joining you have to do, the better. You can see there's a piece of hay in there. We'll just pick that out. My sheep tend to get lots of hay, and I've many a times picked out cockleburs out of their fleeces. Okay, so here we've got a very long piece of roving here. I've got this in half, and it's about as tall as me to the floor, where this was the original piece. So you can see how much thinner and longer that looks after the pre-drafting. So next we'll be taking this to the chair, and we're going to place this roving on our lap and get ready to spin. So I'll meet you at the chair. The dominant hand grabs the fiber. The non-dominant hand is pulling away. You can see the fibers elongating. How do you know when to stop pre-drafting? The first clue is visual. Look at the fibers. Are they getting so thin they look like they're going to break? Second is tactile. Does it feel like it will tear apart? This one is the most accurate for me. The more often you do this, the more you will get the feel of it. As a side note, I have noticed that lamb's wool seems to draft and feel slightly different. Also, the amount of lanolin left in the wool may affect how this feels. I have found that my own processed yarn is softer versus processing at a mill tends to be dried out and more stiff. This is another advantage to processing and washing your own fleece. Remember that if you don't want your yarn to be this thin, you don't have to draft it this thin. You get to choose the thickness and thinness of your yarn. Now that we're at the chair and we've pre-drafted our roving, you need to set the roving on your lap. I'll set it on my apron in a zigzag manner. Let's make sure that the machine is ready to go. You want to make sure that the drive band is on the middle groove. Remember, the lower one is only when it's resting. So the middle groove. The machine has been oiled. It is set for spinning, not plying. My speed is set at my preferred speed, and you need to turn it on. The red light will start flashing when it's on. First, we're going to begin by overlapping onto the piece that's already been started. This is why it's important whenever you stop that you leave some unspun at the end. So we're going to take our new piece and literally lay it right on top of the new one. If you feel that it's a little bit on the thick side, sometimes I'll grab it and draft the two together just a little bit more if I'm worried about it getting too thick. But I think this looks good. Remember that there's a foot pedal on the floor, and that's how you control the starting and stopping. So begin by placing your non-dominant hand with your index finger and thumb. You're going to pinch the wool. And this is going to prevent the twist from traveling down when you don't want it to. If, for example, I did not pinch this wool and the machine was on, the twist would rapidly progress down the entire length of this, and I would have no control over it. So the whole purpose of this is to control when the twist is coming down. So I'm literally going to pinch it with my thumb and index finger and hold that. Now I'm going to tap it on, and it's starting to spin. My right hand is smoothing the fibers. and I'm slowly and gradually inching my way down with my left hand so I can control the twist going down. Now you want to make sure that you're going downward in about a 45-degree angle. And I actually do apply a little bit of downward tension, not much, but just a little bit. My right hand is smoothing the fibers so that there aren't any stray lumps that would make a thick spot. And then I let the bobbin take it up. So I continue going downward at a 45-degree angle. And once I get to about this length right here, then I take it up on the bobbin. So I'll lift my left hand upward and allow the bobbin to take it up. Now, since this bobbin is pretty empty, I really don't want any tension at all. So my tension adjustment is set basically as loose as it can be, so counterclockwise. When I've been spinning and this bobbin gets very full, then I'll have to increase the tension knob by turning it clockwise. So you can see how the twist is only happening above my left hand, above the pinching. And I'm able to control where the twist is going as I move downward. When you're a beginner, you're going to notice that your spinning is not very consistent. You'll have thick spots and thin spots. A lot of this is getting used to the particular fiber that you're doing. So what I'm doing in this example here today, this is from Olympia, and she's one of my black Shetland ewes. So this is a Shetland fleece. So averages, like I said, about 3 to 5 inches in staple length. So it is really easy to work with. Ironically, when I was first teaching myself how to spin, I was using the baby doll wool, which has the 2-inch or less staple length. And so that was probably the wrong choice to be learning with. I do recommend getting your hands on something with a longer staple length. Okay, so I just hit the foot pedal, and you can see that the machine stops spinning instantly. The reason is I need to leave a little piece at the end here of unspun wool, because now when I take my next pre-drafted roving, I need to overlap this again to continue onward. Let's just take a little peek here quick to see what it looks like, what we've been doing so far. So if you need a little motivation, stop and take a look at your work. So I'm very happy with this. This is very consistent in diameter. So another thing you want to do as this bobbin fills up is make sure that you're moving along. So you go ahead and squeeze this here, and that'll allow it to move. So you're just moving the yarn guide over so that we can continue winding around the bobbin evenly. And I'll often go back and forth as I'm winding. And this is the Country Spinner 2 bobbin. It's huge. It will hold a lot of yarn. So that's one thing that's pretty nice. So at this point, we would take another piece of roving. And what did I say the most important part was? Pre-drafting, pre-drafting, pre-drafting. So we'll go back to doing that with this. But you can see how easy that was, where all I had to do was concentrate on what my hands were doing. I didn't have to think about pedaling with my feet. And once you kind of get your groove going and you're used to the speed and fleece that you're working with, you don't have to constantly stare at your hands the whole time. So I'll often have my tablet sitting here on the side, and I enjoy watching stuff on YouTube while I'm spinning. Next, I want to go over some common troubleshooting with spinning. The first one is if you have underspun wool. In other words, it has a very loose twist to it. To solve that, you would increase the speed and decrease the tension. But that's not a very common problem. The more common problem is over twisting. And boy, I can tell you, I struggled with this at the beginning. I had a lot of over twist. So, what is over twisting? Over twisting, and you can even just see a little bit of it here, but the yarn tends to kink up on itself. So there may be spots where it kinks up on itself a little bit. And it's also going to be really hard. This is pretty good, but it's going to look very twisted, kinked up, and very hard and dense. And you don't want that. But it is a very common problem for beginners. So to fix the over twisting, you're going to need to decrease the speed. I prefer the speed, but if I was over twisting, I'd probably turn it to about there. And then you want to increase the tension because that'll take it up faster. So you want to slow it down so it's not twisting as much while you're working it. And then by turning this high, it's going to get taken up faster, so it has less time to over twist. So I hope that helps you. One thing I want to mention is that this takes a lot of patience. A lot of patience and perseverance, but it is worth it. Practice, 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 right? I had this in, I want to say, 2019 is when I bought it, and it's 2020 now, and I'm just finally getting decent at spinning. So it does take practice. Experiment with different fleeces. As a beginner, I would start with a long staple length, and have fun. Have fun. It's a really cool thing.